Welcome to Theater Corner. I'm your host, Michael Taylor. Theater Corner was created as an ongoing effort to increase more diverse interest and involvement in the theater scene. This episode is brought to you by our generous new sponsor, the Westgate Hotel. We will film today's interview in the exquisite presidential suite. The Westgate is a one-of-a-kind hotel completed in 1970 and filled with timeless elegance not found anywhere else in San Diego, California. Designed as a recreation of an anteroom in the Palace of Versailles. The grand lobby is noted for its magnificent antiques, Baccarat crystal chandeliers, Flemish and French tapestry, and Persian carpets. The mega television superstar, Michael Boatman, will join us to talk about his passion for performing, his experience at the Old Globe Theater, his books, as well as his immediate career plans. So, silence your cell phones, folks. You're about to enter Theater Corner. Here we are with the masterful Michael Boatman.
Thank you, sir.
You are very welcome to be here at Theater Corner. Thank you so much for taking time to come visit a brother.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
All right, and you know this is all for you. We're here in the presidential suite at the Westgate.
I feel presidential
because you are the real deal. So we figured we'd do something special for you.
Do you think our former president ever stayed here? As Illinois boys, between the two of us?
That's who knows? That's a possibility.
He had to have come to San Diego at least once. You must remember if he came.
Oh, he has come here, but who knows? That's possible.
It's the presidential suite.
It's the presidential suite, and this is a special interview. I think because we got so much in common. We're both Michaels. Yeah. We both grew up in Illinois.
Both born in 1964.
We were both born in. I shiver when I say that year. We were born in the same year.
Sorry.
The last year of the baby boomers.
Right.
But it's okay.
That's right. And it's now officially far enough away in time that when I say the first three numbers of the year that I was born, most people go, ooh.
Oh, stop right there.
Wow. They go, ooh, it's a long time ago. Oh, my God.
Very good. So the reason you're even here in San Diego, you're performing at the Old Globe Theater.
Yeah, I'm performing at the Old Globe Theater, which, as I said to someone the other day, is when you're a theater-trained actor, as I am, and if you're of a certain age, there are certain regional theaters in the country that are kind of bucket list theaters, places that you fantasize or dream about working. And for me, that's definitely the Globe. I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, and friends of mine would get jobs at the Globe, and I'd go, oh, why did I get that job? I want to, for whatever reason, I mean, you know that it has a great history, a great tradition of doing great work, and for many, many years now, obviously. And so, and there were a couple of opportunities in the past where either I was working on a television job or my children, I have 4 children, and for whatever reason, the timing just wasn't right to work at some of these other places. But one of them is the Globe, say, or the Guthrie in Minneapolis, the Goodman in Chicago. There's just some great regional theaters that I think every actor or many actors of my vintage would say, And so when I got a chance to be in this production, and the timing was right. It's in between a couple of other gigs, and my children are now old enough that they don't need me anymore.
Oh, so now that
they just need me to drive them around and have my wallet handy.
Exactly.
So that was a relief. But it was just the perfect time to come to beautiful, unbelievable San Diego.
No kidding. So now that you're here, what's your experience been like? What has it been like to perform on the Globe stage?
It's been great. It's working at the Globe has been one of those moments. It felt like the first time I ever worked on Broadway. And I've been in 2 Broadway shows, but the very first time you stand on a certain stage, if it has that kind of meaning or that kind of resonance for you, you just sort of you pause and you say, "Oh my God, I'm here."
I'm here.
Now, I've been an actor for 30 years, and I've performed lots of places, but obviously the Globe, like I said, bucket list. So you stand there, and then you have the great comfort in realizing it's just theater. It's what I've done, it's what I do, it's what I love to do.
Right.
And then you go on and you rehearse, and then you hopefully have a great show, and
I like that.
and it's a familiar process, but there's also an element of sort of a dream come true.
Right.
You know?
I love it. And you're performing in Robin Hood.
Performing in Ken Ludwig's Robin Hood.
Robin Hood.
Yeah, because there's lots of productions of Robin Hood apparently in the world, and that show, that idea is very popular right now. I don't know why. Stealing from the rich to give to the poor.
Right.
But Ken Ludwig, who wrote some classics like Lend Me a Tenor and Crazy for You, and then he had his Baskerville show at the Globe last, and so this is his take on Robin Hood.
Very good.
And I get to play Prince John.
Prince John, which you did. This play it's a hoot. It's a laugh a minute.
Yeah.
And so you actually play 3 or more characters actually,
which I was not informed about until the day before I got to San Diego. Somehow, either my agent didn't tell me or I didn't read my contract, but in my contract there it says as cast next to role, Prince John and as cast. And I'll say it, I've been fortunate enough that I usually just play one role and that's it. So I called the assistant stage manager at the time, and I said, I think you guys might have just sent the wrong email. Is there another Michael in the cast? Is there like a grad student who's playing all these other smaller parts? Because I'm playing Prince John. And she then said, oh, no, Ken Ludwig likes to use the same actors to play multiple parts in one show. So there's only 8 actors. And I remember sort of stopping as I was talking to her and saying 8 actors because there are, I think, 75 parts.
Wow. Wow. So that had to be exhausting. I mean, there's a lot going on. You guys are moving. You're doing that night after night.
Night after night. Twice on Saturday, twice on Sunday.
Us being the same age, I respect you that you were pulling this off.
Listen, there was a low moment 2 or 3 weeks into rehearsal where I thought, I can't do this. I'm too tired. By the time I finished doing all of my smaller non-speaking parts, or the parts with only a couple of lines, this is rapid fire costume changes, multiple costume changes, some back to back.
Right.
Wigs, beards, sword fighting. People are swinging around on ropes.
Man, it's incredible.
So
if you folks want to catch this, you are performing until
September 10th.
September 10th. Yeah, so you still got time to get in there.
But there was a couple of low moments where I thought, I wanted to work in the theater again. And admittedly, the last play that I did, the last Broadway show I did, wasn't particularly physical. It was a lot of talking. I had to learn how to fake play the piano because I played Scott Joplin.
Okay.
And that was physically not challenging at all. This was different.
Oh, wow.
But great. And now we're up and running. We're 2 weeks away from finishing, and the show's really fun.
It's fantastic. I appreciate it. And the Globe is fortunate to have you performing.
Thank you. I feel really happy and honored to, because there is that part of many actors, I can't speak for everyone, but there is still a part of me that every once in a while kind of stops and goes, wow, me? Really?
Yeah, I can see.
It's just me. And then you get to meet other people who you respect, and I saw Robert Sean Leonard as
Richard
II, and you go, well, okay, I guess I am here, and why not? And so it's validating on a whole other level. Wow. That maybe Hollywood films or TV shows don't. I mean, there's something about the stakes of performing live in front of a room full of people.
Very high stakes.
Yeah, yes. And for me, that's when people ask me all the time, "What's your favorite? TV, movies, film, or theater?" And I always say, well, and it's true, it's theater because there's a live, instant response, and there's an element of walking a tightrope.
Right.
And I don't know if that means I'm an adrenaline junkie. I don't think I am.
Adventurous.
I'm a little. My wife would disagree. She's really adventurous. But you know, I always say that there's nothing like the feeling of rehearsing a show for 4 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever it is, having to press through all the problems, all of the obstacles. I was probably 15 pounds heavier when I got here. Thank God I've been able to lose a little weight, but that's not why I took the job, Michael. You understand? But to be able to, but that was an obstacle for me. I mean, I'm the oldest person in the company. Everybody else is, just fresh out of grad school or whatever, and for the most part, some people are in their 40s. But for me, that was an obstacle, and being able to master it, and as I've always thought, there's something about getting it right for an audience.
Right.
You just can't beat it. And sometimes, sometimes it works in front of the audience, sometimes it doesn't, but there's something about that 4-week process of getting it into your DNA and finally being able to sort of present it. And then you can play and you can, deviate a little from, what you've sort of worked on. And there's nothing like that feeling, so.
Wow. When I was first introduced to you when I was in the Marine Corps in the 80s, the mid 80s.
Wow.
I knew you as Motown on Hamburger Hill.
Yep. And by the way, Motown from Hamburger Hill never got a name. He was, I think literally my dog tags I have at home in New York, I still have the dog tags, I think they actually say Sergeant Ray Motown. Like whoever made the tags maybe didn't quite get Motown
as a nickname.
Didn't really know what Motown was at the time. So at least I got Ray, but they never called me Ray in the movie. It's just Motown.
Right.
So.
No, it's beautiful. I mean, I was in the infantry, and that's just a classic, and it still is.
Thank you.
It's beautiful.
I must say, I get a lot of vets, particularly from that period, who come up and they either think I was with them in the service in the Marines, or they but when they realize what it is and that and for some reason it's different from like Platoon or even a Full Metal Jacket, which we talked about earlier, which were all around the same time, and I think mostly because of the fact that it was infantrymen. It was the guy on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where who stood to lose the most. So yeah.
So you spent majority of your career and profession as in television. I'd say primarily.
Yeah.
We're talking Spin City. Anger management.
Yeah.
Where you
Arliss.
You performed every single episode.
I was in every episode of Spin City. Spin City started in 1996 in New York, which is when my wife and daughter and I, at the time, my daughter who was just born, she was born like the second week of Spin City. Wow. We moved from LA to New York because Michael J. Fox had a deal in his contract with the network that said that he could shoot a show in New York. So why not? So we moved to New York. But before that, I was on another Vietnam era project called China Beach that a lot of people.
China Beach.
And that was, so the Vietnam era, for some strange reason, and I guess because of when I started as an actor, that's where the awareness of war, it was before the Gulf War.
Before the Gulf, yeah.
So people were just starting to feel comfortable enough to kind of look back at that war, at the Vietnam War. So yeah, Hamburger Hill, and then maybe I think about a year later I started China Beach, and that was 3 seasons. And that was told from the production of largely the women, the nurses, the donut dollies at a medical base at a real place, China Beach, actually, which I don't think is actually there anymore because it's like a resort or something.
Right.
Vietnam.
But I want to have time to talk about you're a writer also. You're an actor.
Yeah.
You are a writer, and I have one of your books here that I've gone through. Fantastic. When you pick it up, you can't put it down.
Thank you.
Who Wants to Be the Prince of Darkness?
Yeah.
And you write in a particular genre, a special genre.
Well, I was numbered among writers of a subgenre of horror called splatterpunk.
Splatterpunk.
Splatterpunk was a popular sort of subgenre, and the writer who was considered the father of splatterpunk, who I actually thank in this book, my great friend David J. Scow, who wrote The Crow, that movie. You remember the film The Crow? lots of great books, but he was one of my favorite writers in that genre. And I read all kinds of genres, but at that particular time when I started writing, I was reading a lot of zombies and vampires, and that's sort of what I was into. But I also have always loved comedy, and what splatterpunk, as it was deemed at the time, boasted was, yes, some of it was very sort of visceral horror, you know, some would call it gross out horror, but there was also kind of a very dark, almost black humor. Not black African American.
Just dark.
Dark, yeah. Sort of a dark humor that ran throughout it. And because I've always been attracted to comedy, you know, that's sort of where my writing has tended to kind of walk that line between, you know, the funny place between, you know, a scream and a laugh, as a friend of mine has always said.
Yeah. I think to give the viewers somewhat of an idea of your this style, this genre, I want to read a description of your writing from Joe Lansdale, and he described it. Michael Bolton writes, like a visitor from hell. Someone out on short-term leave for bad behavior. I think this captures, and after reading your work, that's pretty accurate.
Thank you.
But it's beautiful. I mean, in a wonderful way.
Joe R. Lansdale's one of the best, and he was definitely an influence. People always ask writers, who are your influences? And I've had lots. I mean, you know, Ray Bradbury, when I was a kid, I read, you know, so many of his books, or Isaac Asimov. I love science fiction, I love fantasy, I love comedy and horror. And Joe R. Lansdale very, you know, graciously took me by surprise by agreeing to write that quote. And so, boy, that's sort of, you know. But he was someone that I always thought really walked that line, that could sort of really scare you one minute and then have you cracking up the next. And so that's kind of where I just seem to find myself many times in most of my books.
Wow.
And short stories.
So without giving away too much, kind of describe what goes on in this particular book, the setup, because it's quite something. It's
well,
quite
Who
unique.
Wants to Be the Prince of Darkness is actually the second book. There are two books in this series. You could read them both independently of each other. But this is the second book. They both take place in a world where all of humanity's gods and devils have essentially taken human form. Some voluntarily, some not so. Some still have their supernatural powers, but in greatly reduced degree, and some are more just sort of human. Anybody who's sort of read the Neil Gaiman, like American Gods, or Terry Pratchett, those are sort of science fiction-y versions. But I've always been fascinated personally by religion. I'm fascinated by what we do with religion. I'm not a person. I'm not a religious person myself, but I certainly grew up in a Baptist household, and I know the Bible.
Both.
Right. And so these two books particularly have a lot to do with, well, who are these characters that we worship?
Correct.
You know? What does it mean to be God? And is it any different than what it might have meant to be Zeus 2,000 years ago, or Satan, or any one of numbers of deities and demons, archdemons from history, and they both books actually sprung from a conversation I had with my nephew, one of my nephews at the time, when I first started writing Last God Standing. We were walking around in a mall in Maryland. My nephew, Skylar, at the time was at a very conservative Christian school, and he was maybe 10. And my wife and I and he were walking around in the mall. And at the time, there was one of these Clash of the Titans type movies out, that had a picture of Zeus hurling thunderbolts. And I'm not only fascinated by religion, I'm mythologies of all kinds. I'm fascinated by all of it. And those books sort of sprang out of the question for me of, when does religion become mythology? When does When does it become okay for me to say, well, your God's not the real God, my God's the real God?
Right,
well,
right.
that other person still thinks their God is
Correct.
their God, and how does, what happens when those two sort of schools of thought meet? And so when my nephew saw this picture of Zeus, he asked me, he said, hey, who's Zeus? Because it said on the poster, it said Zeus, father, king of the Greek gods, or king of the gods, I think. It was even. And I remember, I'll never forget my nephew saying, what does that mean, king of the gods? And I said, well, in Greek mythology, I look over his shoulder, my wife, who's a very smart woman, she's an attorney, my wife's going like that. But I don't know why she's doing that, so I'm just talking, because my nephew, who I love, has just asked me this question. And I said, well, in Greek mythology, the gods were, there was a family of 12 gods. No.
Oh, jeez.
And I didn't get it. And I just kept talking, and I said, and so Zeus was he was God for lots of Greek people for thousands of years.
Right.
And my wife is just like rolling her eyes. So after we dropped him off at home, my wife, we get into this big argument, and I said, what's the big deal? She said, you can't tell him that. I said, tell him what? She said, well, we don't have permission because he goes to this Christian school.
Oh, geez.
I said, but this is fact.
Right.
And she said, what do you mean fact? I said, no, I'm not saying it's fact I'm saying that you could pick up a history book or an encyclopedia.
It was someone's reality.
It was someone's reality.
Right.
And so after we kind of worked that out, these books kind of sprang to my mind. The first one, Lando Calrissian, Darnell Cooper, is an African-American comic on the south side of Chicago who happens to be the latest incarnation of the Judeo-Christian God, who is looking for his ancient adversary / best friend, Lucifer, who he can't find. And that's how that story unfolds and also he's trying to marry the girl of his dreams, who's a beautiful Ethiopian girl.
Right.
Who's just a human being. And so he's sort of trying to learn what it means to be human. That's Last God Standing. This book follows Lucifer's sort of version of that story after the events from the first book. And so, because if God has a story, Lucifer must have one too.
Exactly.
So this is the story of Man Ray Mothershed, who was a motivational speaker a la Tony. Tony, what's the big guy? Tony, he's huge. He's all.
Oh, Robinson.
Yes.
Tony Roberts.
So Man Ray Mothershed is a world famous motivational speaker a la Tony Robinson, who discovers that he is the latest incarnation of Lucifer, or the latest heir to Lucifer's sort of kingdom on earth. And
wow.
so, Satan, monsters, demons, but hopefully all with a laugh.
It's beautiful work.
Thank you.
And so I'm going to be waiting impatiently for the next one.
Wow,
so now I'm hooked.
Oh,
you got
boy.
me hooked now.
Yeah.
So
that's the fun thing is trying to figure out what the next book might be. Because I've learned, I guess, over the 20 years or so that I've been writing, is that books come to be for a reason. I've come to any work of art, I think, does. Whether you're talking about a play or a statue or some urge in the creator, in all of us, I suppose, wants that peace to exist. I've always believed that you have writers like Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun and The Sign in Sidney Brewstein's Window, which a lot of people don't know, but if you're sort of a theater background, then you might have heard of it, but you've definitely heard of Raisin in the Sun.
Correct.
Which to me is the absolute epitome of the African American experience in this country. To this day, I don't think that play has been equaled. People talk about August Wilson, whose works I absolutely respect and adore in that 10-play cycle, but to me, Lorraine Hansberry's one play encapsulates all of it. And then she died, 30 years old. And so to me, there's something about something that needs to be said or needs to be expressed in some way through art. And for the first half of my writing career, I had no problem with whatever that thing is. And now I'm at a place where I go, I don't know, done with vampires, done with gods, done with maybe zombies, I don't know. Superheroes, oh, everybody's got so, I'm kind of waiting for inspiration.
Okay, well, I'll be waiting there, like I said, impatiently.
Okay.
Speaking of blacks in theater and such, we like to talk about diversity and inclusion here on Theater Corner. What says Michael Boatman?
There's a funny side of diversity in show business particularly, and in publishing. Mm-hmm. Because I think we imagine diversity, I know I did, I imagined diversity in a very narrow framework, in the sense that in how it would apply to me or people like me, And now what I feel like we're seeing, I alluded earlier to how I perceive there to be a slight schism, say for instance, between African American actors and Afro-British actors.
Right.
About Afro-Brits playing sort of classically American parts, the gentleman who played in Selma and Martin Luther King stories. And I know that the two communities have sort of, not battled, but sort of, criticized each other, which to me is always sort of ironic, because that seems to be how it's the divide and conquer thing.
Right, correct.
But I think that it's also kind of emblematic of what actual diversity means. I mean, I'm working in a play right now, playing Prince John, which who would have imagined? And at one point I also appear as King Richard, and I can almost hear some of the older members of the audience going, huh? That sound that a dog,
right.
Trying to sort of, but then it's okay. I just, at the Globe also just did a wonderful production of Guys and Dolls, where Sky Masterson and Nathan Detroit were both played by African American men.
Correct.
Which is something I never really thought that I'd see. But I also never thought I'd see an African American president. So
there you go.
So I think that it's now, I feel like, yes, we're finally getting, in film, we're getting really, to me, wonderful films like Get Out, like we talked about, that don't just sort of, that really have something to talk about, because it's not just enough, in my mind, it's not enough. I mean, this came out of Jordan Peele's experience, obviously, as a man of color in this country, and it resonates that way, and it's resonated with a larger audience. So yeah, we're in a period where diversity is appreciated, and I think it's more. It's just more. We just need more.
And it's
now
becoming...
is the time where I think now is the time. I think, like as we said earlier, with all these platforms opening up, and there's 9,000 channels.
Right.
Everybody needs content. That's the first time I've ever used the word content on camera, because I say shows.
And now diversity is they're recognizing it as profitable. So
it's profitable and it's necessary, because to me, diversity is also a way of thinking, in the sense of, what's your story?
Correct.
And that way, when we see your story, and when we see the story of a woman whose life may be completely different than someone we recognize, then we see our shared humanity. But until then, it's just them, that Correct. Other person. Yeah. And I think that, to me, is the greatest potential that for where we are now, in the business of images, is it's got to be about humanizing each other, that there is no experience so alien based on skin color, religion, gender,
Very
sexuality,
true.
that
Very true.
We can't understand it.
Right.
If we see it, now we're getting a chance to start seeing it. We just need more.
Yeah. So before we let you go back to the theater, let the viewers know what you have coming up next.
Well, I just co-starred on a spin-off of I played the character Julius Kane on The Good Wife for about 9 years, off and on, not regularly, but that show was spun off into a new series called The Good Fight, which is on CBS All Access. And I was in the first season of The Good Fight, and now I'm actually going to be in, I think I was in 7 episodes in the first season, and now I'm a regular for the next season, which starts in about a month. So I'm here at the Globe for another 2 weeks, I think. I think I'm going to take a week off, tour up and down the coast of California a little bit, if my wife lets me. Or maybe you'll come join me, honey.
There you go.
And then, yeah, you go. And then I'll go back to New York and work with the great Christine Baranski on The Good Fight. So
awesome.
I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also trying to figure out what the next book is and the next group of short stories. So.
Okay.
I'm going to find that teenager who's running our reality with his computer and tell him to give me the last 6 months back.
There you go. Yeah, awesome. That's beautiful. Yeah. So Michael Boatman, I appreciate you coming by.
Thank you,
watch out for him in The Good Fight on CBS. And thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
For gracing.
Great to be here.
Yes.
The only man in San Diego with an ascot. I just want to say.
Why not? Let's make it sexy again.
I love it. I love it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it myself.
There you go. All right. And thank you, viewers, for stopping in for another episode of Theater Corner. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.